Hello, everybody. This is Thursday's daily devotional, where we're looking at Jesus in the Old Testament. And today I have a text that doesn't point to Jesus directly, but does talk about faith and what faith does. Faith is letting go of yourself and looking and trusting and believing in God and what God can do rather than what you do. And the text that we're going to look at today is one of, I have so many favorites, but this is a really fun text because I think it took me a long time to realize the reason that the Israelites wandered around the wilderness for 40 years was because of them, not because God wanted it. Because they had first gotten to the promised land rather quickly, and they sent some spies in to check it out, and they come back with a report about what they saw. And this is the report, and this comes from Numbers chapter 13. They came back and they said, yeah, the land was as wonderful as everybody said. In fact, they said it was a land of milk and honey, and we misunderstand that. We think it's a land of milk, like cow's milk, and probably goat's milk, and honey being from a bee. But actually the honey is something that even today they make out of dates. So it's a date honey. And so what they're saying when they say it's a land of milk and honey, it's a land where you can grow animals and you can grow produce like dates and other things. Even today in Israel, there's date trees that they harvest, and they make date honey. I had some when I was over there. So it's a land of milk and honey. They say it's fantastic. So then they say, well, let's go in. Let's go do what God has told us to do. So here's the response. And the response is a response of fear. So listen to this from starting with chapter 13, verse 30. But Caleb tried to quiet the people as they stood before Moses. Now, Caleb's a guy who trusts God and he wants to go right in. So he says, let's go at once to take the land, he said. We can certainly conquer it. Caleb, he's ready to go, right? Now listen to the response from the other men that went in. But the other men who had explored the land with him disagreed. We can't go up against them. They are stronger than we are. So they spread this bad report, probably a lie, this bad report, about the land among the Israelites. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. I mean, they talk about, when you're trying to make a point sometimes and you expand it, you make it worse. And look at how they make it worse. The land we traveled through and explored will devour anyone who goes to live there. Well, they just were there and weren't devoured. All the people we saw were huge. We even saw giants there, the descendants of Anak. Next to them, we felt like grasshoppers. And that's what they thought, too. They thought we were grasshoppers. So here's this, obviously, exaggerated report of what they saw there. And because of that, because they didn't have faith to trust God, who had just brought them through the sea, they had just defeated the Egyptians, for goodness sakes. The Egyptians, the most powerful nation in the world, had been defeated because of what God had done. They couldn't trust God now to go into the land God had promised them. They couldn't trust him. And so they made up fearful reports and they exaggerated rather than trust God. So what God did was he had them wander around the wilderness for another 40 years, literally until that generation that had not gone in was either old or gone. And this new generation that had trusted God in the wilderness for 40 years, and when they got back to the same place, they sent spies in, and they came back and said, no problem, we can take this land with God's help. So here's the lesson for today, and that is that faith is trusting that God will do what God promises to do. And a lack of faith is not trusting yourself, looking to yourself for the power and the wisdom to do what God has asked you to do. And if we're just trusting ourselves, that's not going to be very good. That's not going to be very helpful. But if we're trusting the Lord for what He has said He would do, what He has promised to do, well, that's a whole different story, because we know the Lord will keep His promises, just as He did 40 years later for the Israelites eventually, who did go in and conquer the land and take it just as God had said that they would. So remember that today. Trust the Lord, not yourself. Look to God. Look to His promises, not your own self. And that's a good message for today. Have a great day. God bless.